English 122, Day 5, Argument Structure, from Writing Arguments, pages 73 to 87. Logos refers to the strength of an argument's support and its internal consistency as represented by the argument's logical structure. The goal of a writer in making an argument is to strengthen the resolve of those who already agree with a claim and/or weaken the resistance of those who oppose a particular claim. Claims are supported with reasons, often stated as because clauses attached to the claim, which are then supported by factual evidence. Real-world arguments are not grounded in abstract, universal statements, but rather in the beliefs, assumptions, and values of the particular audience that the argument is being written for. In real-world arguments, these beliefs, values, or assumptions often remain unstated. But if these underlying assumptions do remain unstated, the argument can only be persuasive if the audience already agrees with the assumption. An enthymeme is an incomplete logical structure that requires the audience to willingly supply a missing underlying premise or value in order to make the argument persuasive and effective. The word enthymeme comes from the Greek en, meaning in, and thumos, meaning mind. So, in an enthymeme, the audience must already have the underlying assumption in mind. In this case, the enthymeme represents a relationship between a claim and whatever reason is being used to support that claim. If the audience is unwilling to supply the missing underlying premise, referred to as a warrant, then the argument fails. If the audience doesn't accept the warrant at all, then the writer must supply another underlying assumption to support it, and so on until they find common ground with their audience. Let's look at an example. In this claim, we see the statement that marijuana should remain scheduled as a Class 1 narcotic, and then we see the reason to support that claim because otherwise there will be a rise in unwanted pregnancies. So here we see that there's a relationship between the claim and the reason that requires the audience to have an underlying assumption about the connection between marijuana and unwanted pregnancies. So it might require the audience to assume that marijuana leads to lowered inhibitions. However, remember that successful arguments depend both on what the arguer says and on what the audience already has in mind. The Toulmin model from the 1950s rejected argument based on formal logic in favor of argument based on an audience-based courtroom model. This assumes that all assertions and assumptions are contestable by opposing counsel, which forces writers to anticipate counter-arguments and to question assumptions. The Toulmin model also assumes that final verdicts about the persuasiveness of an opposing argument are rendered by a neutral third party or judge or jury, which reminds writers to answer opposing arguments fully, without rancor, and to present positive reasons for supporting their argument, as well as negative reasons for believing the opposing case. However, in contemporary argument, we combine Toulmin's language with Aristotle's concept of the enthymeme to get a model that is much more consistent and much more relevant to modern day communicative norms. As we heard before, the term warrant refers to the underlying assumption that turns an enthymeme from simply a claim and a reason to a complete logical structure. Remember that the warrant is a value, belief, or principle that the audience has to hold if the soundness of the argument will be guaranteed or warranted. So therefore it guarantees the soundness of the argument. The term grounds refers to the supporting evidence that causes an audience to accept an argument's stated reasons and can include facts, data, statistics, causal links, testimony, examples, anecdotes, and more. However, the warrant also needs support as well. The term backing refers to the argument that supports the warrant. If the audience already accepts the unstated assumption behind the reason, the warrant, then the warrant can remain hidden in the background or unstated between the claim and its reason. But if the audience might question or doubt the warrant, then the writer needs to back it up by providing an argument in its support. Adversarial readers can question an argument's reasons and grounds, or its warrants and backing, and sometimes both. Remember Toulmin's conditions of rebuttal. The term qualifier refers to any word or phrase that limits the force of a claim and/or indicates the degree of its probability or truth. This reminds readers that real-world arguments almost never prove a claim, and that no argument is 100% persuasive. These can include words like very likely, probably, often, maybe, and more. Remember that audience-based reasons are the foundation of any persuasive real-world argument, and that finding audience-based reasons means finding arguments whose beliefs the audience will accept and are effectively rooting the argument in the audience's beliefs and values.